Logan Pierce would remember the moment for the rest of his life, not because of the words, but because of the silence that followed. His 5-year-old son, Ollie, was buckling himself into the car seat, still humming a song from daycare, when Logan's phone buzzed on the dashboard. "Moving to Barcelona with van. I emptied our savings. Good luck paying the mortgage." 12 words. That's all it took for Logan's marriage, his trust, his home, and nearly a decade of his life to fracture like glass under a hammer. His fingers went numb around the steering wheel. His throat tightened, but no sound came out. Ollie called from the back, "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" And Logan turned, forcing the faintest smile, his heart splitting open beneath it. He knew in that second, not later, not when the bank accounts confirmed it, that Serafina hadn't just left. She'd erased him. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. Logan Pierce could hear his son's laughter before he even stepped inside the daycare center. That high, unfiltered joy, a sound that used to feel like home. Ollie came charging across the polished floor, his arms wide, curls bouncing, his small hand clutching a crayon drawing. "Daddy! Daddy, look! It's us!" His voice was sunshine, pure and careless. Logan knelt down, swallowing the knot in his throat, and smiled as Ollie crashed into his arms. He ruffled the boy's hair. "Wow, buddy, that's awesome." His voice sounded normal, even to himself. That was something. They walked to the car together, Logan carrying Ollie's bag, listening as his son chattered about his day. A new friend, a funny teacher, a song about spaceships. Logan nodded, offered little smiles, buckled his son in. The spring air was heavy with Miami's signature wet heat, and the sun bounced off the penthouse towers that lined the waterfront. His Lamborghini gleamed by the curb, too flashy maybe, but a symbol of everything Logan had built. He climbed in, started the engine, and glanced at his phone. One new message. He read it once, then again. "Moving to Barcelona with van. I emptied our savings. Good luck paying the mortgage." For a moment, Logan couldn't hear anything. Not the hum of the engine, not Ollie singing in the back, not the pulse of traffic outside. Just the words. 12 words. His fingers curled tightly around the steering wheel. A fine tremor spread through his arms, up his shoulders. His chest locked, but no sound came out. It was as if his body wanted to explode and collapse at the same time. From the back seat, Ollie called, "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" Logan took a breath, forced his lips into something like a smile. He turned halfway in his seat. "Sure, buddy. Ice cream sounds great." He pulled away from the curb smoothly, like nothing had just ruptured beneath his skin. Because the last thing Ollie needed to see was his father break. By the time they reached the penthouse, Logan's mind was on fire, racing through every account, every asset, every conversation he could remember. He carried Ollie up the private elevator, unlocked the door to their glass-walled home, set him up at the kitchen counter with his drawing pad and favorite snack. Then he stepped into his home office, closed the door softly behind him, and opened his laptop. First the joint accounts, empty, then the investments, gone. Crypto wallets, moved, even Ollie's trust account, something Logan had set up years ago, pulling from bonuses and IPO wins to make sure his son would always have a foundation. Wiped out. Logan sat back in his chair, a sharp cold spreading from his chest to his fingertips. It wasn't just that Serafina was gone. It was that she'd planned this. Months, maybe a year, in the making. The woman he'd built a life with, the woman he'd trusted, had dismantled him with surgical precision. His phone buzzed again. A notification from Instagram. Sarah Langford, glowing on a balcony in Barcelona, a champagne flute in hand, eyes half-lidded at the camera. Tagged in the background, Evander van Marchesi, Barcelona's art world darling and crypto NFT king. Tall, chiseled, dangerous in the way only people with too much money and no conscience could be. Logan felt his stomach twist. He clicked to see more. Photos, videos, captions. New beginnings in Barcelona. Sometimes you have to choose happiness. The comments were all fire emojis and heart eyes and Yas Queen, from followers who had no idea they were cheering on a woman who had just annihilated her husband's life. Logan's hands hovered above the keyboard. For a moment, his vision blurred. He forced himself to blink. He could hear Ollie laughing softly from the other room, humming to himself, a little boy without a clue that his world had been gutted. Logan pushed back from the desk. He crossed the room, picked up a framed photo, him, Sarah, and Ollie at the beach 2 years ago, all sun-kissed smiles and sand-streaked arms, and for a long second, he just stared at it. Then, with careful precision, he set it face down on the shelf. His phone rang. It was Nico Hale, his best friend, co-founder, and the one person outside this apartment who might understand. Logan answered quietly. "She's gone." There was a pause on the line. "Gone where?" "Barcelona, with Van Marchesi. She emptied the accounts." Nico's sharp inhale was audible. "Jesus, man." Logan closed his eyes, resting his head back against the couch. "Yeah." For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Nico said, "What do you need me to do?" Logan opened his eyes. Somewhere inside, a hard line was being drawn. He thought about the past 2 years, the late nights, the fights brushed off, the locked phone Sarah never let out of her sight, the increasing distance. He'd chalked it up to stress, to work, to the grind of public life. He hadn't wanted to believe what was obvious. "I need you," Logan said softly, "to help me get my son through this." And then, after a pause, his voice sharpened. "And after that, we go after them." He ended the call and sat quietly for a long time, watching the Miami skyline darken. Somewhere below the noise, beneath the heartbreak, a voice inside him was already whispering, "This isn't over." It wasn't just about Sarah running off. It was about what she had taken, what she was planning. And Logan knew now he wouldn't let her win. Later that night, after Ollie was asleep, Logan sat back at the desk. He worked through the bank records. He traced the transfers. And as he watched his accounts drain line by line, something in his chest hardened. He pulled out old passwords. Dates Sarah would have never expected him to remember. He cracked into old backups, found traces she hadn't covered, moves she hadn't thought he'd catch. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. And she hadn't done it alone. He pulled up Van Marchesi's name, his galleries, his art valuations. Logan read until his eyes burned, until the shape of the scheme began to sharpen. And somewhere, between the wreckage and the data, Logan's grief began to cool into something razor-edged. He shut the laptop softly. He walked down the hall and paused at Ollie's door, cracked open just enough to see the rise and fall of his son's breath, the stuffed dinosaur tucked under one arm. Logan leaned against the doorframe, heart aching. Then, under his breath, he said it. Not a vow, not a threat, but a simple, unshakable truth. "We're going to be okay, kiddo." And for the first time since the message, Logan believed it, because heartbreak was one thing, but erasing him from his son's life, that was something else entirely. And Serafina Langford was about to learn that Logan Pierce didn't break. He rebuilt. And this time, he would rebuild stronger. Not just for himself, but for the one person who needed him to rise. Ollie. Always Ollie. And so, with a slow, quiet breath, Logan turned away from the door, squared his shoulders, and began the long, deliberate process of fighting back. He was just getting started. Logan Pierce stared at his reflection in the dark window, the lights of Miami glittering behind his face like a mocking backdrop. His penthouse, once a place of celebration, was now a hollow space of cold glass and sharp edges. Somewhere down the hall, Ollie slept soundly, wrapped in a cocoon of blankets, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, blissfully unaware that his world had been split in two. The next morning, Logan woke before dawn, not because he'd slept well, but because his body wouldn't let him stay still. He moved through the motions, coffee, shower, check on Ollie, without fully feeling them. The scent of Ollie's shampoo on his pillow, the little-footed pajamas, the sound of small breaths from the bedroom, these were the things anchoring him. He sat at his desk with his laptop open, blue light painting lines across his face. His fingers moved instinctively over the keyboard. Passwords, account numbers, backups. Every hour revealed more. The joint checking accounts, drained. The brokerage accounts they'd built together over a decade, closed, moved, gone. Even the crypto wallets, those should have been untouchable, emptied through a complex set of transfers to wallets Logan didn't recognize. Van Marchese's name appeared in too many places: payment memos, art invoices, consulting fees. Logan's stomach clenched. This wasn't a hasty, love-struck getaway. This was a planned extraction. Sarah had been doing this right under his nose, month by month, transaction by transaction. She must have been smiling at him over dinner while wiring out five-figure transfers in the background, laughing with him at Ollie's preschool art show while moving assets offshore, holding his hand at charity galas while deleting the foundation beneath their life. For a moment, the weight was almost too much. Logan leaned forward, pressing his palms to his eyes, feeling his pulse throb against his fingertips. But when he looked up, something inside him had shifted. This wasn't the end. This was the start. By mid-morning, Logan was on the phone with Nico Hale, his best friend, his co-founder, the man who had been by his side since their startup days, when they were living off energy drinks and pizza, trying to turn a crazy AI prototype into the multi-million-dollar machine it was now. "She didn't just leave me, Nico," Logan said quietly. "She gutted me, and she didn't do it alone." Nico was silent on the line, but Logan could hear the rustle of papers, the tapping of keys. Finally, Nico spoke. "Do you want me to look into Van?" "Yes." "And the crypto?" "Everything." Logan hung up and rubbed the back of his neck, the tension so deep it felt fused to bone. That afternoon, an unknown number lit up his phone. He almost didn't answer, but something told him to pick up. "Logan," said a female voice, low and sharp. "It's Amara." He froze. Amara Langford, Sarah's estranged sister. The two hadn't spoken in years. Not since a scandal tore Amara's modeling career apart, a scandal Sarah had allegedly helped engineer. "What do you want?" Logan asked, his voice cold. "To help you," Amara said smoothly, "and maybe help myself." They agreed to meet in New York, at a discreet wine bar far from cameras and influencers, tucked into the corner of Manhattan where the wealthy went to disappear. The space was velvet-lined, all shadows and soft jazz. Amara arrived in a black coat, her hair tied back, her face leaner than Logan remembered. "Relax," she murmured, sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm not here for drama." Logan studied her. She looked like Sarah if Sarah had been hardened by ice instead of polished by mirrors. "Why are you here?" he asked. She smiled, sharp and small. Because Sarah burned me once, and now she's made the mistake of burning you. Amara slid a USB drive across the table. What is this? Voice memos, screenshots, draft custody documents. She and Van have been planning this for over a year. Logan felt his jaw tighten. They want to take Ollie, Amara continued. Not just financially. They want to cut you out. Use your anxiety history against you in court. Logan exhaled, slow and measured. And you're just giving this to me? He asked, his voice dry. Amara laughed softly. Oh no, Logan. Let's not pretend this is charity. I want something. Money? Eventually, maybe. But mostly, I want Sarah to lose. You'll find I'm very motivated. Logan picked up the USB, turned it between his fingers. I don't trust you, he said calmly. You shouldn't, Amara murmured, rising. But you need me. She left, leaving the faintest trace of perfume behind. Back in his hotel room, Logan sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, heart hammering as the files loaded. The voice recordings hit him like a physical blow. Sarah, laughing softly in a Barcelona hotel suite. He's too predictable. Once we have custody filed, he'll fold. Van, his voice smug. He'll be a headline. Nothing more. You'll be untouchable over here. Other files showed Sarah drafting social posts in advance, carefully crafted captions to paint herself as the victim, the courageous woman escaping a cold, neglectful husband. Logan closed the laptop, staring at the wall. For a long time, he sat in the quiet, feeling the tremble of his own pulse, the weight of his own breath. This was no longer about money. This was war. By the time he flew back to Miami, Nico had updates. We traced some of Van's crypto movement, Nico said as they stood on Logan's balcony, looking out over the water. Wash trades, fake valuations, probable money laundering. Logan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. NFTs? He asked. Yeah. Who's the biggest insider? Nico hesitated. There's a name, he said. Julian Morel, art curator, Vans. Well, let's just say Sarah isn't his only lover. Logan's head snapped up. What? Yeah, Nico confirmed. Julian's been with Van for years. Word is, Julian's pissed. A new door cracked open in Logan's mind. Leverage. He stood there, arms crossed, as the sun went down, watching Ollie chase bubbles in the yard below, his small feet thudding on the grass. There was still time. Sarah didn't know who she was dealing with. Not yet. That night, Logan stayed up late, working in the soft glow of his home office, fingers moving through data, cross-referencing transfers, legal documents, public records. Raya Winters, his lawyer, was on speed dial, preparing filings. Nico worked the crypto angle. Amara fed him insider details. It was a strange alliance, built on necessity, not trust. But Logan didn't need trust. He needed results. And when Sarah came back, and he knew she would, he intended to be ready. As dawn crept over the water, Logan leaned back in his chair, his body aching, his mind sharp. He rubbed his face, stood, and walked quietly down the hall to Ollie's room. He stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep. All the noise fell away. This was why he was fighting. Not the money, not the headlines, not even the betrayal, but the little boy in the bed who deserved a father who didn't break. Logan swallowed hard. We're going to be okay, kiddo, he whispered. And for the first time in days, he believed it, because heartbreak was over, and the fight had just begun. Logan Pierce sat at his desk long after midnight, the Miami skyline glowing through the penthouse glass like a living thing, pulsing, glittering, endless. His laptop screen bathed his face in cold light, the files open in front of him like an autopsy of his marriage, voice memos, bank transfers, screenshots, drafted legal documents. He leaned forward, jaw clenched, replaying the moment Amara Langford's voice crackled through his headphones. Sarah's sister, whose bitterness had become Logan's accidental weapon. She's filing for custody in Spain. She thinks you're too soft to fight. Soft. The word sat in Logan's chest like a stone. No one had ever called him soft when he'd built his company from nothing, when he'd outworked competitors, when he'd faced down multi-million-dollar contracts. But Sarah? Sarah knew how to hit where it mattered. He played the next file. Sarah's voice, light and cold. Once we're settled in Barcelona, he won't follow. He hates conflict. Logan exhaled sharply through his nose. You don't know me at all, he murmured under his breath. The door cracked open behind him, a small voice cutting through the sharp focus of his rage. Daddy? Logan turned, quickly softening his expression. Ollie stood in the doorway, pajama-clad, clutching his dinosaur. I had a bad dream, the boy mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Logan rose instantly, kneeling. Hey, come here, bud. He pulled Ollie into his arms, pressing a kiss to his temple. You're safe. You're okay. As Ollie nestled against him, Logan felt his chest tighten. But it wasn't the constriction of grief anymore. It was resolve. Sarah wanted to erase him. She would not. The next morning, Logan sat in the sunlit office of Raya Winters, his lawyer. She was known as a shark, but not the flashy kind. No Instagram profile, no public showboating. Her power was in how quietly she could dismantle a person's legal defenses. Across the table, she flipped through the binder Logan had delivered. Jesus, she muttered, eyes flicking over wire transfers, asset lists, custody drafts. Logan watched her. Can you stop her? Raya raised a brow. Not only can I stop her, Logan, I can bury her. He exhaled slowly. I don't need her buried. I need Ollie safe. And I want my accounts back. Raya's mouth twitched into something like a smile. That, I can guarantee. As they mapped out a legal strategy, Logan's phone buzzed. Nico. He stepped into the hallway, answering low. What did you find? Van's NFT empire is a house of cards, Nico said without preamble. Fake buyers, wash trades, laundering signals everywhere. And Logan? What? There's someone you need to meet. Julian Morel sat in the private lounge of the Langford Hotel, a glass of something expensive sweating in his hand. He was younger than Logan expected. Sharp suit, dark eyes, polished European accent. But it wasn't his looks that mattered. It was his expression. Tired, angry, cold. So, Julian said softly, folding his hands. You want to bring him down. Logan met his gaze steadily. I want him out of my son's life. Julian's lips curved, humorless. I want him out of mine, too. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside, account details, deal memos, private chats, receipts. Van's entire fraudulent empire laid bare, and, most importantly, Sarah's fingerprints on several of the transfers. Why are you helping me? Logan asked. Julian's gaze didn't waver. Because Van used me, because Sarah laughed at me, and because some betrayals deserve to burn. Logan's stomach tightened, but he gave a slow, controlled nod. You give me what I need, Julian murmured, and I'll give you the match. Days passed in a blur of preparation. Raya's legal team drafted emergency custody filings. Nico coordinated with regulators, anonymously tipping them to Van's laundering operations. Amara sent insider updates. Sarah's frantic messages to family, her plans to fly back to Miami to smooth things over, her private panic. Logan moved through it all with a strange, cold clarity. This wasn't the man Sarah thought she'd left behind. He wasn't just surviving, he was strategizing. One night, Logan stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean, watching Ollie draw chalk rockets on the terrace floor. His son was laughing, the sound high and free, oblivious to the legal storm swirling around him. "Daddy, look!" Ollie called, holding up a drawing. "We're going to space!" Logan smiled faintly, crouching. "That's awesome, bud." Ollie threw his arms around his neck, and Logan closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the small, fierce weight of his son's love. It hit him then, hard, deep, undeniable. This was why he was fighting. Not the money, not the reputation, not even the betrayal. Ollie. Always Ollie. It happened on a Tuesday night. Logan was reviewing final legal documents when the call came. "Logan!" Nico's voice was sharp, urgent. "She's here." Logan's pulse spiked. "Where?" "Downstairs. In your building." For a second, Logan's body locked up. Fight, flight, freeze. And then, with deliberate control, he rose, straightened his sleeves, and walked to the elevator. He found her in the lobby, draped in designer calm, hair perfectly undone, eyes glossy. "Logan?" Sarah breathed. "Can we talk?" She reached for him as if no storm had passed between them. Logan stepped back, cool and steady. "You want to come upstairs?" Her eyes flickered. Relief, calculation. "Yes." Upstairs, in the pristine glass living room, Ollie burst into delighted laughter. "Mommy!" he cried, racing to her. She swept him up, her smile radiant. For a moment, Logan stood back, watching the scene. It should have crushed him. It didn't. Because behind the bookshelf, tucked discreetly, a recording device captured every word as Sarah whispered over wine. "We can fix this, Logan. We don't have to fight. We can share custody. We can find a way back." But her eyes flicked to the side when Ollie wasn't looking. Cold, calculating. Logan smiled softly, nodded in all the right places, and waited. That night, after she left, after she kissed Ollie's hair and murmured promises, Logan closed the door, locked it, and leaned his forehead against the cool wood. His heart thudded once, hard. Then he pushed off, exhaled, and called Raya. "She's back," he said quietly. Raya's voice on the line was calm steel. "Then let's get to work." At dawn, Logan stood once again at the window, looking out over the water as the sun broke the horizon in bands of gold. His reflection stared back, tired, lined, harder than he remembered, but alive. Beside him, Ollie tugged at his sleeve, sleepy-eyed. "Daddy, can we have pancakes?" Logan ruffled his hair, voice thick. "Yeah, buddy, we can have pancakes." And as they moved through the kitchen together, father and son, quietly rebuilding, Logan felt the weight in his chest shift, just a little. He wasn't done, but he wasn't defeated, not by a long shot. The next moves were already lined up. Sarah didn't know it yet, but the game was about to change. And Logan Pierce, the man she'd underestimated, the father she thought she could erase, was ready. The morning Sarah's second passport was discovered, Logan Pierce felt something inside him shift, like a final, silent crack where the last piece of trust had once sat. He stood by the glass wall of his penthouse, overlooking the sunlit sweep of Miami's coastline, phone pressed to his ear as Raya Winters delivered the news. "Logan, we pulled her travel records. She has another passport under her maiden name, issued a year ago. She's booked one-way flights for herself and Ollie, Barcelona next week." For a moment, Logan's mind went blank. Then, slowly, deliberately, he exhaled. "She was going to take my son." Not was, Logan, is, unless we move, now. "I want her stopped." "You will," Raya said, her voice steel. "We're preparing the motion." Logan hung up and stood in the silent apartment, Ollie's giggles echoing faintly from his room as he played with his toy rockets. The air felt sharp, electric. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about abduction. And that, Logan thought grimly, was a line no one crossed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Van Marchese's empire was beginning to shake. It started as a rumor, an anonymous tip sent to regulators, then a quiet investigation, then a leak to the financial press. Suddenly, Van's name was splashed across European headlines: NFT kingpin or crypto con. Marchese art empire under investigation for money laundering. Julian Morel, Van's secret lover and now Logan's unlikely ally, provided everything: fake buyer lists, doctored ledgers, secret offshore accounts. He delivered it not out of loyalty but fury. Fury at Van's lies, and fury at Sarah for laughing at him behind closed doors. Logan read the first breaking story from his phone, standing on his balcony as Ollie napped inside. For a long moment, he watched the clouds drift over the water, the weight of months pressing into his spine. They had made their first move. The storm was coming. Days later, Logan sat at his kitchen table, Nico Hale pacing nearby, while Raya dialed in on speakerphone. "Emergency custody motion is filed," Raya said crisply. "We have the recordings, the financial evidence, the travel plans. Once Sarah's back in Miami, we serve her." Logan rubbed a hand over his face. She's coming back," Nico added. "I heard from Amara. Sarah's panicking. She thinks if she can calm you down, she can negotiate. She has no idea." No, Logan thought. She didn't. She had no idea the man she thought she was running circles around had already mapped the whole game. That evening, Logan got the message he'd been waiting for. Sarah was at the hotel lounge asking to meet. Alone. Logan dressed carefully, choosing calm over confrontation. He walked through the lobby, past polished marble and soft lighting, until he saw her, perched at the bar, sipping white wine, eyes wide with practiced vulnerability. "Logan," she breathed when she saw him, sliding gracefully off the stool. "Thank you for coming." He let her pull him into a soft embrace, feeling her arms around his neck, smelling the perfume that once undid him completely. But now, all it smelled like was strategy. They sat. She talked. "I miss Ollie. I didn't want things to be like this. We were good once, weren't we?" Logan nodded, murmured, watched. He watched her hands flutter over the rim of her glass, watched her eyes flick to the side when she spoke, watched the way her mouth twisted when she said, "We." All the while, behind a decorative vase at their table, a small recording device caught every word. That night, back at the penthouse, Logan stood over Ollie's bed, brushing his son's curls from his forehead as the boy slept. He remembered the early days, the night feeds, the preschool drop-offs, the way Sarah used to lean against the nursery door frame, watching him rock Ollie to sleep. Had it all been real, once? Or had it always been performance? Logan swallowed hard, pressing a kiss to his son's temple. "We're almost there, buddy," he whispered. "Almost through." The next morning, Raya's team moved. Legal servers arrived at the hotel with crisp precision, handing Sarah the emergency custody motion, the asset freeze order, the travel hold notice. Her face, caught by a bystander's phone camera, flashed across social media within hours, frozen, pale, caught between rage and disbelief. Logan didn't gloat. He didn't even smile. He just watched quietly from the window, arms folded across his chest, as Ollie raced toy cars across the living room rug, laughing. At the same time, news from Barcelona worsened for Van. Interpol issued a notice. Galleries pulled his shows. Investors called in debts. Van tried to wire a last desperate transfer to Sarah, but Logan's forensic team intercepted the flow midstream, freezing the funds and blocking the escape. When Van called Sarah, panicked, begging, she didn't answer. When Van texted, threatened, pleaded, nothing. She was scrambling to save herself now. That evening, Sarah appeared one last time at the penthouse. Logan opened the door to find her on the threshold, makeup streaked, designer coat wrinkled, eyes wild. "Logan," she choked. "Please, let me explain." He stepped aside calmly, gesturing her in. Ollie, seeing her, sprinted forward. "Mommy!" Sarah dropped to her knees, clutching him, burying her face in his hair. For a long moment, Logan stood back, watching, his heart twisting, not with longing, but with something quieter, something like grief. She had chosen this. She had broken this. She had lost this. When Sarah looked up at him, tears glittering in her eyes, he met her gaze steadily. "We'll figure something out," she whispered. "For Ollie." He smiled softly, tiredly. "We will," he said. But in his mind, the decisions were already made, and they didn't include her. That night, after she left, after Ollie was asleep again, Logan sat on the balcony alone, feeling the cool wind on his face. He thought about the man he had been a year ago, believing in a life that had been half illusion, working late hours to build a family someone else had already decided to walk away from. He thought about Sarah and Van and all their lies. And then he thought about Ollie. Small, bright, unbreakable. That was his future. Not the penthouse. Not the accounts. Not the headlines. His son. And now, nothing was going to take that away from him. Logan closed his eyes, let the wind move through him, and felt, for the first time in months, like a man standing not in the middle of his ruins, but on the edge of his rebuild. And this time, he would build something no one could take. Not Sarah, not Van, not anyone. The courtroom was colder than Logan expected. Not physically. Miami's spring sun pressed against the tall windows, soft light spilling across the polished floors, but in mood, in air, in the sharp-eyed quiet of everyone inside waiting to see how far a marriage, a fortune, and a family could fall. Logan sat at the plaintiff's table, his hands folded neatly, face composed. To his right, Raya Winters shuffled papers, her expression cool and sharp as ever, the faintest flicker of anticipation in her eyes. Across from them, Sarah sat in a cream blazer, blonde hair swept back, makeup pristine. She kept glancing at her phone, at her lawyer, then at the gallery door as if hoping Van would walk in and sweep away the tension. He wouldn't. Van was thousands of miles away, hiding under a new alias, his empire crumbling, his bank accounts frozen, and Sarah, for once, was alone. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The bailiff called the case. And then, with the simplicity of a breath, the next chapter of Logan's life began. Raya stood first. She laid out the timeline with surgical precision. The marriage, the shared assets, the evidence of systematic asset transfer over 12 months, the second passport, the one-way flights for Sarah and Ollie. Then came the digital evidence, recordings of Sarah and Van plotting to cut Logan out of custody, financial trails showing Sarah's participation in Van's fraudulent art dealings, the intercepted funds Sarah had tried to receive after Van's collapse. Logan watched Sarah shrink, inch by inch, behind the defense table. Her lawyer, a smooth-talking, expensive man from a firm that specialized in high-net-worth dissolutions, rose, all honeyed tones and courtroom charm. He painted Logan as obsessive, overworked, distant. "Mr. Pierce," he said, turning slightly toward the gallery, "is a brilliant entrepreneur, yes, but brilliance," he added with a small, pitying smile, does not always translate to stability at home. Logan felt Raya shift beside him. Your Honor, Raya said coolly as she rose again, we have already submitted the defendant's statements describing Mr. Pierce as predictable, safe, and, my personal favorite, non-confrontational. It is quite a leap to now claim him as volatile. The judge's brow lifted. Sarah's lawyer sat down, adjusting his cufflinks, and then the doors opened. A hush moved through the room as Julian Morel entered, accompanied by a federal investigator. Logan felt a muscle jump in his jaw. Julian took the stand, dark-suited, elegant, his voice soft but steady as he detailed the reality behind Van Marchese's empire. Fake auctions, false buyers, shell companies, and most damning, Sarah Langford's active role in laundering funds under the guise of influencer partnerships funneled through Van's crypto accounts. Did Ms. Langford know the funds were illicit? Raya asked. Julian met Sarah's frozen gaze and said quietly, she knew. We all knew. By the time the testimony ended, Sarah's mask had cracked. Her face, once so perfectly curated, was pale, her eyes fixed on the table. Logan saw the moment it hit her. Not just that she was losing, but that she had already lost. Not just the money, not just the case, but the story. Her version of events, the victimized wife, the misunderstood influencer, the woman who left for love, was dead, and in its place was the truth. The judge called for a short recess. Logan stepped into the hallway, Nico by his side. Jesus, man, Nico murmured, clapping a hand to his shoulder. She's finished. Logan exhaled slowly, the knot in his chest easing. Not gone, but easing. Not yet, he said softly. But close. Back inside, the final statements were brief. The judge's ruling, when it came, was crisp, unsparing, and final. Full physical and legal custody awarded to Logan Pierce. All marital assets frozen, pending forensic review. Supervised visitation rights for Sarah, contingent on psychological evaluation. Sarah's travel restricted until the resolution of ongoing investigations. And then, just like that, the gavel came down. Outside, the media frenzy erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters called Logan's name. But Logan didn't pause. He carried Ollie in his arms, his son's small fingers gripping his collar, and moved through the crowd with Nico shielding one side and Raya the other. Daddy, Ollie murmured into his neck. Can we go home now? Logan kissed the top of his head. We're going home, Bud, he whispered. We're going home. That night, Logan sat on the floor of the penthouse living room, Ollie in his lap, the boy giggling as they built a haphazard block tower. Across the room, the TV was muted, scrolling headlines without sound. Sarah Langford loses custody in public showdown. Marchese fugitive status confirmed. Financial trail leads back to Miami influencer. Logan ignored it all. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages, media requests, financial updates. He let it buzz. Ollie laughed as the tower toppled. Logan laughed too, the sound rusty but real. For the first time in months, maybe longer, he felt like himself again. Not the version Sarah had left, not the man clawing through betrayal and panic, but the man who had built his life, his family, his home, not for Instagram, not for show, but for them. Just them. Later, when the apartment was quiet and Ollie was asleep, Logan stood on the balcony, looking out over the city. He thought about Sarah, not with rage, not even with sadness, but with a strange, almost surgical detachment. She had wanted more. She had taken everything, and in doing so, she had lost the only thing that mattered. Van was gone, running, hunted. Sarah was alone, cornered. And Logan? Logan was still standing, stronger, sharper, clearer. He had rebuilt from the inside out, not with money, not with power, but with something much harder to break. Resolve, love, truth. He heard a soft sound behind him, turned to see Ollie in the doorway, hair tousled, small fists rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Daddy," he whispered, "I had a good dream." Logan crouched, gathered him up, felt the small arms wrap around his neck. "Me too, buddy," he murmured. "Me too." And in that moment, as the city flickered and pulsed below, Logan understood. The fight was over, and they had won. Completely. The first days after the courtroom victory were a strange mix of quiet and collapse. Logan Pierce walked through his penthouse as though it was a new place, not because anything had changed physically, but because everything inside him had. Ollie played on the living room rug, his small voice filling the space with laughter as he sent toy cars rolling across the floor. For the first time in months, Logan could look at his son without feeling the cold twist of dread in his gut. He could pick him up, feel the soft weight of his arms around his neck, and know that no one, no passport, no flight, no scheming lover in Barcelona was coming to take him away. Still, outside their glass walls, the storm raged. The media turned Sarah Langford's name into clickbait. Influencer gone wrong, Sarah Langford's downfall. From glamour to courtroom, the messy split behind Miami's power couple. Marchese fugitive, Langford under investigation. And yet, in the middle of it, Logan stayed quiet. His phone buzzed with requests, interviews, statements, invitations. He declined them all. He didn't want to explain his side. He didn't need to. The facts were doing it for him. 3 days after the hearing, Logan stood at his floor-to-ceiling window as Nico Hale read off the latest headlines.
"Van's name's being blacklisted everywhere," Nico said, pacing with his phone in one hand, coffee in the other. "Interpol's in. European art councils are pulling funding. Every crypto platform he touched is freezing accounts. And get this, he tried to transfer assets through a secondary wallet last night, and they caught it. His own lawyers turning on him." Logan gave a slow, tired exhale. "And Sarah?" he asked. Nico looked over. "She's done, man. Brand deals cut, followers bailing. She's holed up in that hotel downtown, apparently losing her mind trying to call PR firms." Logan's eyes flickered. "Let her," he said quietly. That evening, as twilight sank into the city, Logan received the call he hadn't expected. "Logan," came Amara Langford's voice on the line, sharp as ever. "You'll want to know this." He stepped out onto the balcony, phone pressed to his ear, feeling the cool air bite at his skin. "Sarah?" he asked. "She's broke," Amara said. "Van drained her personal accounts before skipping town. The apartment in Barcelona was under his name. She's here, stuck, and she's panicking." Logan closed his eyes. "I thought you'd want the satisfaction," Amara added, her voice a little amused, a little bitter. He did, but it wasn't the kind of satisfaction he'd imagined. That night, Logan stood in his kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea he hadn't touched, when the call came from the front desk. "Sir, Ms. Langford is here." He paused. Then, "Send her up." When the elevator doors slid open, Sarah stepped out slowly, dressed in a coat too light for the night air, heels clicking against the marble. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was smudged. She looked smaller, thinner somehow, and not from grace, but from unraveling. "Logan," she murmured. He didn't move. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, two people who had once shared a life, a home, a child, and now stood as strangers on opposite sides of a canyon.
Sarah's voice broke, just slightly. I have nothing left. Logan's jaw flexed. He crossed his arms. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said softly, but that's yours to carry now. She flinched. I never wanted to hurt Ollie, she whispered. But you did. I was scared. Logan shook his head slowly. No, you were selfish. Sarah's lip trembled. For a moment, it looked like she might step forward, reach for him, beg for something. But then she seemed to deflate, shoulders sinking. I don't know what to do, she murmured. Logan's voice stayed calm, quiet, even. You figure it out. He closed the door after she left. He didn't watch her walk away. The next morning, Logan woke to soft sunlight spilling across his bed, the sound of small footsteps outside his door. Daddy? Ollie's voice, sleepy and bright. Logan smiled before his eyes even opened. Come here, bud. Ollie climbed into the bed, snuggling close, warm and wiggly. Logan wrapped an arm around him, breathing in the scent of shampoo and crayons and the pure, uncomplicated safety of his child. They lay there for a long moment, and Logan felt, for the first time, the full weight of the truth. It was over. Not the grief, not entirely, not the memories, but the fight. He had won. Completely. And now, all that was left was to build forward. That afternoon, Logan met with Raya in her office. Asset recovery is already underway, she reported, sliding a file across the table. The judge's ruling gives you control over all joint accounts. The forensic team's tracking hidden funds. And bonus, Interpol's contacted us. They may want a statement about Van. Logan shook his head. No media. Raya smiled faintly. I figured. As they stood, Raya paused, resting a hand on his arm. You did well, Logan, she said quietly. He gave her a small, tired smile. Thank you, he said. Later, as evening set in, Logan and Nico sat on the balcony with beers, watching Ollie run circles with a paper airplane. You know, Nico said, I didn't think you had this in you. Logan huffed a soft laugh. Neither did I. Nico clinked his bottle against Logan's. To the next chapter, he said. Logan clinked back. To the next chapter. In the quiet of night, after Ollie had gone to bed and the house was still, Logan stepped onto the balcony alone. The city stretched before him, vast and glittering, the Atlantic dark beyond it. He let the cool air fill his lungs. He let the silence settle into his bones. And he understood, with a clarity that was almost sharp. This was his life now. Not the life Sarah had tried to script, not the life Van had tried to invade, but the life he had fought for, the life he had protected. And it was enough, more than enough. When he turned to go back inside, he paused at Ollie's doorway. His son was sleeping, one arm flung wide, mouth slightly open, the stuffed dinosaur tucked under his chin. Logan felt something rise in his throat, a rush of love so fierce it was almost painful. He pressed a hand to the doorframe, steadying himself. And then, softly, he whispered, We're okay, kiddo. He turned off the light, closed the door gently, and walked away. For the first time in a long time, he walked forward. The days that followed unfolded in a quiet rhythm Logan Pierce hadn't known in years. It was late afternoon now, sunlight casting long golden stripes across the penthouse floor. Logan sat cross-legged on the rug, Ollie in his lap, a pile of crayons and half-finished drawings spread around them. Ollie was focused, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth, carefully coloring a rocket ship shooting toward a yellow sun. Look, Daddy, Ollie chirped, holding it up proudly. That's us. We're flying to the moon! Logan smiled, soft, real, bone deep. He wrapped his arms around his son and pulled him in tight, feeling the familiar weight of small limbs. the warm press of Ollie's cheek against his neck. "Yeah, buddy," Logan murmured, voice low. "That's exactly where we're going." He closed his eyes for a second, just breathing him in. The crayon smell, the faint trace of peanut butter, the clean cotton of his t-shirt. Simple, grounding things. Things that reminded him, in a way nothing else could, that they had made it through the fire. Not perfectly, not without scars. But they were here, together. And that was everything. Outside, the media had moved on. The headlines that once screamed Sarah Langford's downfall and Marchese fraud. King in hiding had been replaced by newer scandals, fresher tragedies. Logan watched none of it. He answered no calls from journalists, turned down every offer for exclusive interviews or tell-all deals. He didn't need the last word. He'd already won what mattered. Sarah had faded from the public eye, quietly leaving the city to avoid the storm she'd helped create. Logan didn't know where she was now, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to track her down. She was no longer a threat. Van remained a fugitive, his carefully curated empire collapsing in lawsuits and criminal charges. Logan heard whispers through Nico, through Raya, through quiet back channels, but none of it touched him anymore. That chapter was closed. One evening, Nico came over, dropping onto Logan's balcony couch with 2 beers in hand. "Man," he said, shaking his head with a low laugh. "You did it." Logan took a beer, smiling faintly. "We did it," he corrected. Nico clinked bottles with him. "You're a stubborn bastard, you know that?" Logan exhaled a laugh. "Yeah. I figured that out." They sat for a while, watching Ollie run around the rooftop terrace, the boy's silhouette small against the pink and orange Miami sky. His laughter floated up to them, clear and high, cutting through the evening hush. "Does he know?" Nico asked softly. Logan shook his head. "Not yet. Not fully. One day when he's older, maybe. But for now, no. He just knows he's home." Nico nodded, thoughtful. "That's enough." "Yeah," Logan murmured. "It's enough." Later that night, Logan stood alone at the window, lights dimmed, the city stretching vast and glowing beneath him. He thought about everything they'd survived, the betrayal, the public collapse, the courtroom battles. He thought about the version of himself he'd been a year ago, a man who believed love was enough to fix anything, who believed that family was held together by will alone. He was not that man anymore, and strangely, that was okay. In the end, he hadn't needed to be perfect. He'd only needed to be steady, for Ollie, always for Ollie. He moved quietly down the hall, pausing at his son's door. Inside, the nightlight glowed softly, casting warm shapes across the walls. Ollie was asleep, one hand curled around his dinosaur, his mouth slightly open, his breath slow and even. Logan leaned against the frame, feeling the familiar aching swell of love fill his chest. He thought about all the things that might have been lost, and he thought with sharp, grateful clarity about all the things they had saved. He had saved. He stepped into the room, crouched, brushed a hand lightly over Ollie's hair. "We're okay, buddy," he whispered. And for the first time, truly, he believed it. In the weeks that followed, Logan rebuilt, not just financially, but personally. He returned to his company, stepping back into a leadership role not as the man desperate to prove himself, but as the man who had weathered something crushing and still stood. His team welcomed him back without fanfare, just quiet support. His name in the business world no longer carried the edge of scandal, but something harder, sharper, more solid, resilience. At home, he rearranged the penthouse. Not because it needed it, but because it symbolized a shift. Photographs of him and Ollie lined the walls now. Simple ones, beach days, pancake mornings, rockets drawn in crayon, moments, not performances. There were nights when the weight of it all still hit him. The memory of Sarah's last look at the door, the taste of courtroom air, the way betrayal had first felt like suffocation, then like fire, then like stone. But those nights became fewer, and in their place came mornings, laughter, the quiet, mundane, beautiful rhythm of life. One morning, Ollie climbed into Logan's lap at the breakfast table, waving a drawing triumphantly. "Look, Daddy," he chirped. "That's you and me, and we're superheroes." Logan grinned, pulling him in close. "Damn right we are, buddy." Ollie giggled. "Mommy's not in it." Logan paused, heart hitching just slightly. "No, buddy," he said softly, smoothing a hand over his son's hair. "She's not." And then, smiling, "But we're okay. Just you and me." Ollie beamed, wrapping his arms around his dad. In that moment, Logan understood, deep in his bones, he hadn't just survived. He hadn't just won. He had rebuilt. And this time, it was unshakable. That night, as the city pulsed softly around them, Logan sat on the balcony, Ollie asleep inside, a beer resting loosely in his hand. He watched the lights, the movement, the quiet life unfolding far below. He thought about what he'd lost. He thought about what he'd saved. And he whispered into the night, not a vow, not a prayer, but a simple, unshakable truth. We're more than enough. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like peace. In the aftermath of ruin, something extraordinary often emerges. Not the triumphant noise of victory, but the quiet, steady hum of resilience. Betrayal strips away illusions. It exposes what was fragile, what was real, and what was worth saving. In the end, the greatest strength isn't found in reclaiming what was lost, but in recognizing what cannot be taken. Dignity, love, and the fierce commitment to rebuild, no matter how scorched the earth. True healing is not the erasure of pain, but the weaving of it into a story that holds meaning. Sometimes, the sharpest clarity comes not from justice or revenge, but from the peace that settles when the fight is over. When the noise fades, what remains are the simple, irreplaceable truths. The value of presence, the quiet power of endurance, and the profound beauty of starting again, not as the person you were, but as the person you have become. Thank you for being here and walking through this journey. If this story touched you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to join us for more stories of resilience, heartbreak, and redemption. Until next time, take care.